Hello, everyone. This is Kent Rourke, and welcome to the very first episode of my POA podcast, Black Hand and Beyond. I want to thank the writer of that song, Don Varnell. He wrote that in Tennessee in 2010, and the POA youth that was at the convention performed that. So I thought that would be a good intro for our show, and we're going to use that every week. So we have some very special guests tonight. I'm going to bring on one of our guests right now. She's kind of a co-host tonight. So say hi, Ashley.
Hello.
There's Ashley Mckenzie. She made the over-hour trip up here from Edmond to Enid, so it's a pretty straight shot. And we're coming live from Studio J, and I want to thank Shane Jackson. He's the owner and GSM here at he's standing right next to me. He helps me out. We do a podcast on Saturday nights about cars and selling vehicles. So he's helping me out. He set up all this great equipment. I named the studio Studio J after the Jacksons in honor of them. So we're going to have some great sponsors tonight. I'll talk about them a little later. Actually, Ashley's one of the sponsors. And Dr. Chocolate, a young colt in Wisconsin, is one of our sponsors. He's the colt on the intro page there. So the reason we named it Black Hand and Beyond is because, we wanted to talk about the past, the present, and the future. So Black Hand represents the past, of course, and that 2-year-old colt, he's a yearling in that picture, Dr. Chocolate, he represents the present and the future. So we're going to talk about the subjects tonight are Black Hand and Ashley. You're a subject, Ashley, a co-host. You got a lot of titles tonight, I guess. So we're going to have
honored to be here for the very first podcast.
Right, very first podcast, yeah. And just like me, Ashley grew up in POAs, and her siblings did, and she's a board of director, and I was a board of director for 2 terms. And what are you on your first?
I'm brand new. I'm
first year.
Yes.
Yeah, your first meeting was, yeah.
Yes.
Well, you didn't, that was the COVID meeting, but at least you got to go to Indianapolis, and that's good. So
you got to see the home office.
The home office. I was on the board when we voted about the home office.
Yeah, it's
so
pretty neat
I used to go to meetings in a room about this big with 12 people, and you put Denny Brown and Harry Chestnut and me in there, you need a lot of Old Spice. So. But anyway, Ashley and I will be talking about her POA, journey later on. But the first subject is Black Hand tonight, of course. He was the number 1 POA. So in 1954 is when he was born, July 10th. So let's put him on the screen there. Did he go on there? There we go. This is our first episode, so just bear with us. We have a lot of pictures of Black Hand. Of course, he was the face of the POAs. So the story about Black Hand is he was a person in Iowa named Bud Droppy bought a couple Appaloosa mares, and they were unregistered, and that he wanted to breed them to a stallion, and he didn't own a stallion, so he decided to breed them he had a little pony stallion, and so he figured the first foals would be a little easier for the fillies. They were 2-year-old fillies. So he brought him to this little Shetland Welsh. It's kind of unclear now, 60 years later, what he was. But some people say he was a Shetland, but I say he was a Shetland Welsh cross, a pony. So out came a little black and white colt. Then the guy sold the mares to another person in Mason City, and that person knew Les Boomhauer. Les Boomhauer was a lawyer at the time. He had, at the time, 2 children. Later, him and Jean had more children, I believe. But Susie was 2 and Dan was 4 in 1954 when this colt was born. And out came this little spotted colt, and there he is now. I don't have any baby pictures of Black Hand. There he is later on. He was a very smart horse. His disposition kind of set the tone, and Les would write about that later on, that he seen his children playing with this little foal, and he was easier to work with than a big colt, and he wasn't as stubborn as a Shetland. So, and then his color just kind of added to it. Les had done some work for George Hatley, the executive secretary of the Appaloosas at the time, setting up the Midwest App Club. So he decided to start a breed. And can you imagine that, Ashley, starting a breed?
I think about that all the time.
Yeah, I mean, there's only a few, like the King Ranch started a cattle breed.
Yeah.
They have their own line of trucks. They're a famous ranch, biggest ranch in America. But there's a lawyer from Mason City, Iowa. I mean, not Des Moines, Iowa, not Kansas City, Kansas, from little Mason City, and he started this little breed, and it took off. He put ads. At first, it was in his law firm, and the office was. And then they eventually bought an office or rented a space in Mason City. And the thing about Black Ant, as he grew up, he looked different in a lot of different views. I mean, sometimes he looked more pony, sometimes he looked a little Arabian. So people are saying hi to us already, so that's good. That brings us to our first trivia question. If you know me, I'm a trivia guy. So Black Ant's dam was registered by Mr. Boomhauer early on, like number 400 and something in the Appaloosa stud book. And her name, he named her Manitoba. But the Appaloosa Club had a typo, and they named her something else. So that's a trivia question. And the winner of that will receive a Dr. Chocolate t-shirt sent to you. Just tell me the size, and if they're in stock, we'll talk about Dr. Chocolate a little more and where he's going to be shown at and where he's at in Wisconsin. But so that's the first trivia question right there. So we do have another special guest tonight, and actually you and our other guest, Ashley, kind of have a connection.
Oh.
Yeah. Besides growing up in POAs, he got in at 4 because Black Ant was born. You got in about 6 or so?
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I got in about 8 or 9, so I'm the old guy of the bunch. But Mr. Boomhauer is going to be our guest tonight, and that's Dan Boomhauer. And let's get a picture of him here if I can find it. There he is. The B for Boomhauer.
The iconic pictures.
That's
of POA.
iconic. Yeah. So that's kind of the connection, because this picture and another picture of him, the one that's on the intro, he's one of the most famous POA kids ever, really, because of that picture. Mm-hmm. And he's retired now. He's living in Apple Valley, Minnesota, and I talked to him for the very first time today, and getting ready for this show tonight. And the connection between him and you, Ashley, is that we're going to talk about this later, but when the Orin Mixer painting was done, you were immortalized too.
Yeah.
In that you were a little kid in there, a little bigger than him maybe, but and we'll show pictures of that. So when I blew up the picture, I wish I could have been in Indianapolis. I would have taken a picture of the real oil painting, and would have got to see, like the face and everything. But I took a copy of a copy from a book. So, yeah, it's I'm getting a call right now.
Goodness.
All right, so let's take this and see. Now, hopefully this will work, because it's not.
We're brand new here.
Okay, Dan, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Can I call in on a different phone here?
Yeah, call in, or let me call you, okay? I'm going to call you on that cell phone you gave me, okay?
Okay, sounds
all right.
good.
I'll call you in a minute. Okay, thanks. So there he is. He was calling me on Facebook, so we're going to call. Can you do me a favor, Shane, and call him?
Yeah.
Let's see. Let me get, there we go. Just get to my phone, please, and call. That's the number right there. So, and we're going to have a lot of fun tonight, because this is our first show, and I was either going to be cranky and in a bad mood. Shane won't let that happen. Ashley won't have. I'm looking at her smiling face. Or I was going to be over the ponies and rainbows. Oh my, that's why we got into it. I love kids and I love ponies. There you go. And now we need to turn. It's up. Yeah.
You're fine. Can you hear it?
Hopefully he answers. He just called on Facebook, so.
Hello?
Hey, Dan, this is Kent.
Hi, Kent.
Hey, how are you doing tonight?
Good.
Good. So we're live. We got some people watching here. More people will watch throughout time. This will be on Facebook and YouTube now forever. So, so just not to get nervous or anything, but I just gave a big speech about you. We're looking at a picture of you with your chaps with the big B. So that was for Boomhauer, right? Not for Black Ant?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. How old do you think you were in that picture? I know you're not seeing it, but it's the iconic picture of early POAs.
Right. I think I was probably 7 or 8 at that time.
7 or 8? Okay. All right. Well, that's cool. So, yeah. And do you remember when Black Hand was a baby, when he was a little bitty baby?
No, I don't.
You don't? But you remember him driving when your dad drove him and stuff? And
right.
Yeah. He was a pretty smart pony, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was very powerful.
Very powerful, yeah. And at the time, our audience has to keep in mind the height limit was 52 inches. It's 56 now, and for a long time it was 54. And he was just a little under the 52, right? Was he like 51 and or something like that? Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yes, he was.
yeah, but I think your dad used him to train a lot of ponies, didn't he? Like bear paw and different young stuff for like in harness.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, we're getting some cool comments in. That's good. So there's people from all over New York and stuff. That's one thing about POA, Dan. You know, I know that was your dad's dream. And when Black Hand sold in '63 and went to Washington, that was one of the things he had written about, was that he'd hoped he'd leave Iowa and go somewhere else and spread POA, you know, spread the breed. And he did, but the breed kind of took off anyway. But Black Hand was a huge part of that, of course. So.
Right.
Not to put you on the spot or anything, Dan, but just kind of go ahead. Any stories you can think of, or, you know, you kind of got free reign here.
Okay. Do you want me to talk a little bit about my dad and the, you know, kind of an overview of the breed and that sort of thing, and then go into some personal stories? Or
Right. That would be perfect. Yeah. I just did a little bit. I just mentioned he was an attorney, and I mentioned your mom's name, Jean, and I said I just mentioned the two kids that I knew of, Susie and you, and then that's all I've really done. So I just said it was surprising, you know, or cool in a small town like Mason City, Iowa, how a breed of animal, a registered breed, took off, you know, and how so many tens of thousands of people, including Ashley and I sitting here tonight, have been affected by that, you know, how it changed our life for the positive. So, yeah, just give us a little background about that.
Sure. Well, it's been 52 years since I've been involved with the POA, but I remember it like it was yesterday. And you're right about Mason City. Mason City was a town of about 20,000 people. And my dad was always fascinated with ponies. In fact, when he was in grade school, he rode a pony to grade school and kept it at the local sales barn during the day, and then rode it back home. And when he was 15 to 17 years old, there was a rail yard nearby where they shipped horses out east for different purposes, not dog food, but for working animals, and he was involved in that. And he became an attorney and was in private law practice for probably 20, 25 years, and then he became a judge for the last 13 years. But during that whole time, his real interest and passion was the pony. And in the early 1950s, he bought the unregistered mare Manitoba with Appaloosa characteristics, and that mare was in foal, and the sire was a Shetland, and the colt that was born was Black Hand.
Okay.
And Black Hand got that name, and Kent, you did a great job writing the history of my dad there.
Thank you. Thanks.
But Black Hand was named that because he was a leopard pattern. He was white with black spots, but on his flank was a series, or some big spots that looked like a hand. So that's how he came up with that.
We're looking at that right now, Dan. Our viewers are looking at that. Yeah, he kind of had a lot of big spots, and then he had that pattern that looks like a hand. Yeah.
Right. And my dad came up with the idea that he'd like to see an intermediate-sized pony for kids between, 7 and 17. There were Shetlands, but they were too small, and horses he thought were too big. So he wanted to come up with an intermediate-sized pony, and Black Hand was really the inspiration for that. And that picture that you're viewing, that actually was me when I was 7 or 8 on Black Hand, and it was in the New York Times newspaper.
Wow.
Because they thought it was such an interesting idea to have a pony for kids and so forth.
Right. And it was America's first pony breed, right? Registered pony, I believe.
I think so. Of course, the Shetland breed was around before, but
it was from England. Yeah, it was. Yeah.
Yeah. So he, along with some friends, started the Pony of Americas, and they developed the breed standard. And the breed standard was that it was a cross between the quarter horse and the Arabian, with the Appaloosa color and characteristics. And the reason that they did that was they liked the Arabian features in the face the dish space, the Popeye, and then kind of the fine legs, but they liked the performance standards of the quarter horse in terms of the power and that sort of thing. So it was kind of a hybrid that way. And he wanted the size to be between 46 and 52 inches at the withers. And he really strived to keep tight breed standards while he was involved in the POA. But one of his big frustrations was a lot of breeders had ponies that were maybe a little bit over 52 inches, so they wanted to change the standard to accommodate their animals.
Right.
And eventually, I think the height went up to 54 inches and then ultimately 56 inches. But he wanted to strive to keep a difference between the pony and the horse and not have that merge.
He wanted it real unique, yeah.
Yeah.
Which it still is today, but I mean, a really top-notch POA at 56 inches or 14 hands, I mean, they move like a horse, like an Appaloosa. They're patterned like one, so it is hard to, a 14-hand POA is hard to recognize from an Appaloosa sometimes. So,
right.
but, you know, we can talk about that all night too, about the 52 and the 54, but you know, more families and stuff join later, and then the more adults. Now adults ride. I know that was different then. It was supposed to be all for kids, but now it's become kind of a family thing, which he kind of wanted too. He wanted a family deal, but just the shorter, you know, more of a unique pony.
Right.
But I mean, you should be proud. Your family should be proud, because what did happen, I mean, like I say, there's a lot of horse equestrians, you know, now too, that grew up in POAs. And some of them say they grew up in a pony club, and some of them say they grew up in POAs. I know if I'm interviewed for something, or somebody at work asks me, oh, did you have horses? I go, yeah, I had POAs. You know, and I know Ashley's not ashamed to say POAs, you know, or Pony of the Americas. So, go ahead and just tell some stories, like later on, like some of your experiences, Dan, when you were maybe in your teens or.
Sure. Yeah, so basically his law background helped him incorporate these state clubs throughout the United States, and then in France, England, and Australia. And, you know, during the 50s and 60s, I was actively involved in raising them and cleaning out the barn and training them and showing them. And the POAs that my dad bred won 18 International Performance Awards. And he got out of the business in 1963, but then he got into the mini pony business and showing ponies to carts and so forth. And in 1968, he won the International Futurity at the American Royal.
Wow.
With drawn carriages.
Okay.
And he became an American Horse Show judge and judged classes throughout the Midwest, not only POAs, but horse shows as well.
Okay.
So he was fortunate to have spent 22 years in retirement following his passion.
Right.
But in terms of some stories and so forth, if you're interested in that, I was responsible pretty much for all of the operations because he was an attorney, and we lived on a 16-acre acreage called Memory Lane Ranch outside of Mason City, Iowa, and we housed some of the ponies at my dad's first partner's farm, which was 40 acres, and then another farmer who had 160 acres where we hauled out hay to them in the blizzards and all that sort of thing. But we typically had about 36 ponies at any one time. And interesting anecdote, his first partner was a guy by the name of George Barrett, who was a pioneer aviator in Iowa, and he was a pilot instructor during the Spanish-American War, and he flew jetty biplanes. And he was in his late 70s when I knew him as a kid, and he helped me clean out the barn and told me stories about his flying days. He actually knew Charles Lindbergh before he made the transatlantic flight to France.
Wow, I didn't know any of that till tonight. know, I feel like I'm a pretty good POA historian, but I didn't know that. I knew George Barrett, knew of him, in that didn't he work for your dad as like a legal?
Well, yeah, George had a grocery store business.
Okay.
And then he was my dad's primary horse partner.
Okay.
But his airplane ran out of gas in northern Minnesota and crash landed in the trees, and Lindbergh help him get it out of the trees, and George towed it back to Mason City behind a Packard car
Wow.
through the Twin Cities on a Sunday morning, way back in the day.
That's before
But,
I-35.
Yeah. So one of our big things was building a good horse barn. We had kind of a small one at first, and my dad went around to all the different horse operations in Iowa and so forth, and tried to look at how they were run. And he picked the best ideas, and he built a barn that was 32 feet wide and 120 feet long. And we had 5 10 by 12 box stalls and a heated tack room and office, a concrete area for washing the ponies with hot and cold running water, and an overhead grain bin with a dispensing chute, and then a hayloft above the stalls where I could drop the hay or the bedding into each stall.
That was like a dream come true there, wasn't it?
Yeah, and the stalls could be converted to tie stalls that would each hold 3 to 4 ponies with a partition between them.
Wow.
But basically, in the spring, it was always fun to see the new foals. We weaned them at 3 months and then began the training process. First to lead after being weaned, and then at age 1, we broke them to the cart. And then at the age 2, we broke them to ride. And he used the lounge line a lot during the training process. And when it was time to break them to ride, I was the rider. And he had a line on the horse while I rode. And we showed extensively in Iowa, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, primarily in Western pleasure, Indian costume, and at halters.
Right.
And for the most part, these ponies were pretty inexperienced. I mean, they were just raised in our barn and so forth. We would turn up the radio, and in the old days, some of you may remember the Art Linkletter show. I'd turn that on, and people would clap, and we wanted to get them used to people clapping and noise and so forth.
Right.
But we ran into some problems when showing. I was on 2 runaways when I was in Indian costume class. I got my costume from the Boy Scouts, and here I was, about a 8 or 10-year-old, wearing size 13 moccasins and a chest plate and the headgear and all the makeup and so forth. I was probably the only blue-eyed Indian in the group, but one was in Marshfield, Wisconsin. The cars were in a big circle, and the showing area was within that framework of the cars, and there's a big opening to go into the rink and another one to go outside, and there was a huge field outside beyond where the cars were parked, and the people clapped, and it scared this pony I was on, Hanzioa, and she took off, and there was no stopping her. She ran around the ring several times and was making a V-line to the open field, and some lady stood right in the middle of that opening and threw her arms up, and the pony came to a stop. So I think she might have saved my life.
Well, that was lucky. I'm glad she did. So we're talking to you tonight. So
the other time was at the Iowa State Fair, and we had worked the ponies and everything, and thought we had all of our bases covered. And we started showing an Indian costume about 10 o'clock at night. And as soon as we went into this domed hippodrome, they started shooting off the fireworks on the midway. And of course, the horses hadn't heard that before, and mine took off, and I was riding bareback, and all I had for bridle was, just because it was trying to be like the Indians rode, I just had a piece of leather through the horse's mouth, and if I wanted to go one rein, basically, so if I wanted to go to the right, I'd pull, and if I wanted to go to the left, I'd neck rein. And that pony took off and ran around that ring 3 times before I was able to get control of her, and my leg was just missing the edge of where the people were sitting by about a foot. And I just saw this blur of color. I mean, I couldn't even see people's faces. It seemed like we were going at 100 miles an hour, and there was a photographer from the Des Moines Register. They had, where the ribbon girl was, and the judge was in the middle of the rink, and they had a little bit of a fence around that. Well, he got outside of that fence and into the area where this pony was running, and he got down to take a picture of it. He thought I was acting like an Indian, putting on a little show or something. And this pony made a beeline for him, and I was pulling, trying to get her under control, and he finally realized I was on a runaway, and he grabbed his camera and jumped out of the way just as she went streaking by. So that was another one where my heart was beating pretty fast.
Well, that was a great story, yeah.
But I'm sure that, you know, many of the people in your audience have if you've been around ponies very much, you've been bit, kicked,
Right.
On runaways, that sort of thing.
Well, my co-host tonight, she grew up in POAs. Her name's Ashley Mckenzie. She runs the stables in Edmond, Oklahoma, and she deals with all ages of kids and, you know, green peas all the way up to national champion, you know, multiple national champion kids. So I know she has a lot of stories.
Oh, yes.
I thought she was over there smiling, Dan, when you were telling that. So she got into POAs when she was about 6. So I won't say her age now, but she has a daughter who's your daughter's what?
She's 5 years old.
5 years old. Okay.
She'll be competing in her 5th national show this summer.
Oh, wow.
I can never remember how old Ella is because she's been to 5, would be 5, and she is 5. So yeah, we have pictures of her tonight all the way from a little baby. So.
Great.
Well, Dan, it's been great. I probably need to move on, but I'll probably have you back as a guest again. And so your dad was a horse judge, and he was a judicial judge, right? After his law firm, was he a district judge or a federal or what?
Yeah, he was the state district court judge.
Okay. Well, it was an honor when I was asked to write basically his POA obituary. You know, I just went to the Mason City thing, or online, I believe, already at that time, and did some background from his personal life, and then I mixed that in with his POA life, and I found out he'd written a book about Shetlands that I'd learned at that time. I didn't know that. So that's one of my goals in life, is to try to find that book. I don't think it's in print anymore, but
yeah. Well, you know, I have one copy of that left. You know, if you want it, I could.
I was hoping you'd have a couple copies.
Yeah. We have it around here somewhere, don't we? Yeah. If you want to send me your address, you know, I'd be happy to send it to you.
Well, that's worth doing Black Hand and Beyond right there. So, because I've been looking for that book for 10 years. So, thanks a lot.
Yeah,
man.
you know, unfortunately, he had a lot of them printed up, and it wasn't a huge seller. And we had about 300 or 400 of them at the old house, and he ended up just throwing most of those away.
Oh man! Well, I wrote a book about POAs when the quarter horse, actually Western Horseman, was doing a series about legendary quarter horses, and then they did one about Appaloosas and Arabians even, and then rodeo stars. Well, I did one about POA stallions, and so I know your dad's pain, because it was hard to get backing, and the club didn't really want to get involved at the time, and I had to find, I found a publisher actually in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and I was living in Minnesota at the time. So, and Stillwater's just down the road from where we are tonight. But, we printed up a bunch of copies, and I think, we sold probably less than 1,000 copies. And people ask me monthly now, people that weren't even in POAs, and some of Ashley's customers, and some show moms and kids, where can I get one of those books? But at the time, it seemed like there just wasn't a big enough market for it. But so, best POA book ever, somebody just wrote. I don't know who wrote that, but all right, Dan. Well, I definitely will. I'll probably call you again and talk about the show. I'll call you this week. It was sure an honor to talk to you, and your family should be proud again of what your mom and dad accomplished, because she was part of it too, I know. And
right. Yeah, it was a pleasure talking to you, and I hope everybody enjoys it as much as I did. It's been a huge influence on my life, and it was just a great time to be involved in that.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks a lot, Dan, for being a guest. All right. Have a good evening. You're welcome.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
So that was Dan Boomhauer calling from Apple Valley, Minnesota. He grew up in, of course, Mason City, Iowa, His dad, Leslie Boomhauer, we all know him as Les Boomhauer. I actually got to meet Les a couple times. I've never met Dan, but and this is the first time I've ever spoke to him
cool.
live.
And you got some swag.
Oh,
You're
I
gonna
got
get
some
that
swag.
book.
I'm going to
That's
go
very
home tonight and
exciting.
clean off a spot for
I
that.
know. You're going to be sending that address out as fast as you can.
I'm not bragging, and I won't give out my address because some horse nuts would do good. But I have a nice collection, so that's what I use some of my commission selling cars for, is buying horse books.
There you
So
go.
that's one of my passions.
I wonder if
so.
that family ever thought that what they started would last this long and have such an impact.
Right. I
You
mean,
know?
and that we'd be
Like
sitting.
from a one kind of random cross of horses.
Right, and I mean, you talk about a cross. It was a Shetland. He wasn't registered. Later,
Yeah.
they did breed that mare, and I have pictures of that. They bred the mare to a registered Shetland, and let's see if we can find him here. You get to see all these pictures as I'm running through. There he is, right there. The name of that POA. Bear with me here. I know it's K&M's. Tonka Mano. He was owned by the Murfelds, who was the ninth people to get in, but he was by a Shetland, a registered Shetland, had a number and everything, and then out of Manitoba. So they were trying to capture on the black hand.
Similar spot pattern. It looks
Right,
like there.
you know. And, you know, later on when the Appaloosas came in and stuff, and that pattern kind of fell, you know, even today.
Yeah.
They don't like that color as much. They want the dark colors and the bold
I
patterns.
like it.
Well, it still has spots, and guess what? It's still an Appaloosa. So I got another one here. Let's see. Now that right there, that was Dan, the man we were just talking to as a young teenager. And I was describing this picture to him today, and he said, well, it's a wagon, right? And I said, or a cart. And I said, well, it says you won the national. Back then they called it the international for you kids that go to the Congress. It was the international show, and that was probably in 60, something like that, 61. And that's a black hands baby, and they called it buckboard, is what the name of the class was. So, and it was actually a class at the international show. So.
I love looking through old magazines and seeing what classes we used to
Oh,
have.
right.
And
Well,
the
you know,
entry forms.
right, and it's changed so much, and you know the structure's still there.
Yeah.
But especially, you know, then you had JPFC, and then, you know, now you have the lead line everything.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm glad I'm not showing right now. I wouldn't be able to run with my kid. I'd be like, sorry, you're gonna lose, buddy.
See, I used to lead line games before it was just walk trot, where you
Right.
had to.
You had to run.
Oh, yeah.
You had to put on your
I was
Nikes
in
and
much
go.
better shape.
Right. So the stallion we're looking at right here, he was a 14-hand registered Appaloosa stallion, and I mentioned earlier that Manitoba had a sister, and that the person from Iowa before Les got the mare had two fillies. Well, one of the fillies was bred to an Appaloosa stallion, and this was the result. And since he was only 14 hands, he ended up being in POAs. You know, they bred him to POAs. Now you got to keep in mind as we look at, now there's Les and George Barrett, that's the man he was talking about. They were partners. And in 1963, they decided to, separate there and kind of get out. George was the executive secretary. He had a young family. I mean, Les was executive secretary, a young family, and he was a practicing attorney. So, I mean, it was a lot of time. You know, he didn't have much free time on his hands, and Black Hand was fairly popular. So they decided to sell Black Hand. And they had a sale in February, I believe it was like February 6th or 8th, something like that, in 1963, and just of their POAs. And Black Hand sold for $7,750, which was a big price because you're buying a baseball card. You know, he was
Yeah.
still a living, breathing stallion, and he was broke to ride and drive, but you were buying the number one registered animal of that breed. So another POA wouldn't sell more than that till 1982 at an auction when Pokey Plotted sold for $8,000. But that's the two gentlemen there, and that's a painting of Black Hand. I seen that in the office. I don't know if it's in the new office, but that painting was in the. It's not very big. It's not like the Orrin Mixer painting, but now you got to keep in mind when you look at some of these. Again, the height was 52, the height limit, and Black Hand was breeding like 46 and 47-inch Shetland, and just a lot of black pony mares that were round. They didn't have a lot of leg muscles, you know. But like this filly, she won her class a couple times. She won as a baby, and she ended up being Bear Paw 2's mother. That's Hand Shasha for people that remember history. So, and then this was my favorite Black Hand daughter here. This was Wachette, I believe is how you say her name, Hans Wachette. And Les actually wrote when they sold her that he felt like she could be put in condition and be a grand champion. You know, she never was, but again, she won. There's two famous things about Black Hand besides being the first POA ever registered and the foundation and all that. He, at one time or another, every stallion that he showed against, he defeated them. If they defeated him, he came back and beat them. So, and then another thing is up to about 1962, every foal that he had that showed at the International, again, the Congress now, won its halter class. So that was that was why he was in demand too. So, and here's another one again, her mother I think Nina or something, like a 47-inch black, and so Black Hand had to try to help the heads out. Now this picture is a historic picture. Black Hand's getting a little older here. This is the trip when he left Iowa and headed to Washington. And that picture is in Butte, Montana, in front of the Corrette Ranch's barn. And Bob Corrette will be a topic probably episode 3 or 4, Corrette Scottish Chieftain. So we're about ready to wrap up on Black Hand. I just want to show a little more of some of his foals, and there again is Dan, and that's I believe that's Bear Paw. Let's see, that's Black Hand 2 right there. That's Black Hand 2, the one with the dark legs. And then that's that stallion we talked about. There's another Black Hand. There's Bear Paw 2. Now, I don't have it tonight, but when I talk about George Bishop and the St. Nick's ponies, everybody remembers the St. Nick's ponies. There's a famous picture. It should be in the museum someday. George Bishop was a famous promoter. He was an oil man, a businessman, and he set up a stage picture of this horse when he was an aged stallion with an elk on his back, like packing an elk. Yeah, and to show that POAs could do anything.
Yeah.
And I've showed that picture in some of the previous things I've tried to do. I hope you're enjoying this show. We got some time left. There's no time limits. Ashley and I are here just having fun, and it's called My POA Podcast. I'm Kent Rourke, and Black Hand and Beyond is the title. So I got about 25 topics lined up. So over the week. Yeah. So I don't know how many times you can make the track, but I mean,
I would just like to, when we get to going over your history with the breed.
That'll be like episode 20. I'll sit over there then, and you can run the show. So that's going to be about episode 20. I planned that. So here's one of the most famous Black Hand descendants. There's actually still, I bet there's POAs in Ashley's barn down there at Silverwind Stable that traces back to Black Hand. Now, more of them would trace to like Siri Chief. He's next week's topic. He's number 2. But this was GR's Raindrop. She was the first grand champion mare ever. And that's Keith Stone. He went in the Hall of Fame right away. Keith Stone and Les Boomhauer was the first 2 inductees for people in 1990, the first year it was existed. And this is a famous mare. This was at the 1970 International Show in California. And that filly, I think, is GR's Mini Bar, Mini Jet, one of those. But anyway, she won her class. They won mare and foal. That mare won a bunch of stuff. There she is with one of the stones. And she sold for a lot of money several times. Again, was a famous, and she was a granddaughter. She was by Hans Tamanas. They like those Indian names, and that's just what they were trying to set. That's why he wanted to keep it a pony at 52, because he wanted it something special and like that. And it's still special at 56. Don't get me wrong, but it's.
I feel like a lot of the apps have gotten bigger, and they don't have color anymore to show.
Right,
so there is still that unique difference.
And quarter horses are paints, and paints are quarter horses. I mean, things have changed, And I wrote in my book, and this will be a topic too. But when the Appaloosas were around with Native Americans and Indians, in the 1800s and stuff, and quarter horses, you can watch an old Western, and they'll talk about steel dust and quarter horses from the 1800s. But it's kind of funny that, the Appaloosa started the club in 37. Quarter horse, AQHA in 40. POA was pretty close in 54, December 10th of 54, but they only had one little baby.
Yeah.
Where the Appaloosa had, Native Americans had been breeding the wildest colored one to the fastest one and stuff like that for years, for 100 years. And quarter horse people the same way. They were breeding the best of the best. So even though they didn't have a registry, the POA had to gleam onto a bunch of ponies and small Appaloosas and cross to try to get a type, and they didn't have a set type. So, and then the first couple stallions, they helped do that, and we'll be talking about that over like Danny Boy and Dragon. I know everyone loves Dragon because of the books and stuff. So, well, we're gonna wrap up. There's a famous picture of Black Hand. That's one of the really good ones. He was pretty mature there too.
And you can see the black hand pretty distinctly.
There you can
Looks
see
like a little black foot too.
Yeah, and I know some halter people would like to have that top line. Maybe not that build, but look at that top line. His withers is higher than his hip for sure. So, and there's the famous. That's the one that was in the New York Times right there. So that's Dan. That was our guest tonight. So. Okay, I'm going to talk about some sponsors, Ashley, really quick. So go ahead and because we're going to start talking about you. So after that, so our sponsors tonight are Ashley's actually a sponsor, and her Silver Wind Stables, and I know she's pretty full up, but if you ever need some stuff, or if you need guidance or whatever, just call her, and she might have an opening. So how many ponies you got down there?
So I was trying to count because I knew you were going to ask me that before you came. My mom and I have barns a mile from each other. Kind of filled her barn up and filled up another barn too.
Right.
Between the two of us, we have easily 100 POAs.
Wow.
And we don't, not that we own, luckily.
Well, yeah.
We have many families.
Right. You have many
probably
families.
At least 60 families that are.
Right.
Into the POAs.
Okay, that's cool. Well, we're going to dive into that a little more, but I just wanted to, again, the song tonight, I hope you like that. That was a blast from the past now, 10 years ago. And I know probably you have customers that never even heard that song. And I hope some people that were singing on that are watching tonight. And we have 117 hearts and 28 thumbs up. So hopefully we got one person crying. Hopefully it was good crying. So, and anyway, so our sponsors, like I said, is Silver Wind, and then also Dr. Chocolate is one of our sponsors tonight. He's a young stallion. He's actually 2 years old. I just love his pedigree. The dude's got a cool pedigree. He's just 2 years old. He won the International Futurity last year in Illinois. So he's not going to stand at stud for a while, but he was bred by, hopefully I say this name right, but Seehafer, is that how you pronounce it? Nikki Seehafer Performance Horses. It's Jesse, Nicole, and Bianca. They're from Marshfield, Wisconsin. And did you notice tonight Dan mentioned Marshfield, Wisconsin?
Ah.
Yeah, and one of our sponsors is the colt right next to him was born in Marshfield, Wisconsin. And he mentioned that about the fair there, whatever. So he'll be standing at stud someday, but he's just a 2-year-old now. Nikki's going to put him on the rail with some people and promote him and show him in halter too. I respect that very much, trying to halter and do, because that's what POAs is, and that's what Les Boomhauer saw, like cart, and now it's, whatever. And now we have lunge line and stuff, and I understand all that. But if you can do a lot with the POA was supposed to be versatile. And okay, it's 50, 6 inches, that's okay. We have 40 and over classes or whatever, that's fine. We have to adapt to survive, and we change our whole life.
We're still super versatile.
Right, we're still super versatile.
Adding new events as they come into the industry.
I mean,
too.
in some families, you can't afford to have a 4-horse trailer with 4 different POAs. I know people, that they just, they showed all summer and paid their Amex card off in the winter, and you didn't see them. They came to the one banquet, or whatever, and they had one of those great POAs, but they had 1 or 2 POAs.
Well, that's kind of the fun thing, those of us that have POAs, we love going to a barrel race, and then we go to our 4-H show or a hunter jumper show on the same horse that can compete well in all of it, and it just blows people away that. Like, that horse can't run barrels.
That's still the best advertising for POAs. You need to support POA because we got to keep the home office going and the stud book and the registry. But we also, if you can branch out and show other places, because it never fails. People come over to your trailer afterwards. And I have some stories like that for some of our next episodes where people got into POAs because of that at fairs or the Tulsa State Fair, So, all right, well, I think I gave a due to our sponsors. We're gonna. Ashley brought us some swag too.
I did.
She stopped and picked up some stuff. So, and eventually, you know, I don't want to make this like some podcast where I just keep talking about a horse or whatever, and he won this and that, and then they pay me $100 for that or something. I don't want to turn that into, but like we were talking earlier off there, I would like to make a little money on the show to buy some shirts to give away and some hats.
Wants to donate any cool swag.
Yeah, or donate some cool swag, and just so it ain't a rare book like Dan donated, you know, then that's going to stay in my collection. But you know, if you, and I'll give you a shout out. You know, we're next week our episode's going to be Siri Chief and Lindsay Peaton. So there again, Siri Chief, and then a young person that grew up in POAs, much like yourself, and now she trains and stuff. And so, but now this portion of the show, who is that kid? It's a fuzzy photo, but who is that there? Is that you?
Well, rumor has it that is what Mr. Mixer said. I'm not sure if he had promised other kids the same
right,
thing,
he might have told everybody that.
You know, but I mean, I'll take it.
He didn't tell me that because I never jumped in my life. So, speaking of Mr. Mixer, Orin Mixer, there he is. Tell me about that photograph.
So I was blessed to live just 5 minutes from Orin Mixer's ranch.
Wow.
And super cool place. If any of his pictures you see, you can tell right where they were painted because it's what he saw outside of his studio. Right. You know, that's the backdrop for it. So we were lucky enough. He did a lot of research for this painting. You know, he traveled all over the country going to see different patterns and everything to really get a good feel for it. So he invited us to come to his studio multiple times. Okay. And that was so neat to see. I mean, I got to see the painting as it was progressing.
Right, that'd be cool.
The depth of it when you see it in person is absolutely unbelievable.
That's what hit me the first time I seen it when I went out to Indianapolis was, you know, the brush strokes and the, you know, just the depth of it.
It comes out. It's like
the eye of the two stallions, I guess they're stallions, you know, but the two big POAs there, the eye is just so realistic. And of course, I grew up looking at all kinds of Orin Mixer paintings, you know, and then I've been to, it's funny, the AQHA Museum in Amarillo, I've been there a couple times now. It has some of his artwork, but if you're fortunate enough to go to the AQHA registry, they have a lot more. The halls are just
lined with
lined with them, and the Palomino and, you know, the quarter horse and stuff. And then he did a lot of work for people, you know, like POA too, but just for individual people promoting their stallions, you know, like EasyJet and all kinds of them.
He gave me a lot of prints. I have a Mr. Impressive print that he signed and a bunch of things. Every time he went there, it's like,
how you doing, Ashley? I need some swag.
It says to Ashley.
Yeah, it says to Ashley. Well, that's my middle name, Kent Ashley Rourke. No, it's not. But so there's that picture again. What's your sister's name?
Allison.
There? Allison. She grew up in POAs too. And you got kind of a famous little sister too, don't you? We better give her some
Elena.
credit. Elena, she won about 1 million classes.
Oh yes.
On a mare with some socks. So, HMH, what's her name?
Super Socks.
Yeah, I know her name. She's probably the winningest POA ever at the Congress and National Show. I'm the one that keeps track of that. And, you know, when I started it, I was 21 years old and, you know, I didn't have anybody there holding my hand. Now everybody, not to knock people, but everybody's a critic. You know, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do... I was sitting on a couch in, you know, sweatpants with a notebook like this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I looked up every national show that ever happened since 59.
It's very important history that we
and
also
that mare,
kept.
She wasn't even born yet when I did that. She wasn't even...
Well, you know her story. She was born solid. And when she was born, and had a ruptured bladder.
Oh, wow.
And Hank and Mary Helen Frieders, who bred him, and Hank said, okay, you know, solid filly, operation, like we're going to put her down. And Mary Helen said, absolutely not. We're not going to do this. And luckily they didn't, because she ended up being a great mare for her family, and she's still teaching lessons to this day.
She's still teaching lessons. Yeah. And that's a good story, because he only had a couple mares, Hank. He became a board of director. And I listened to him at a convention one time give a little seminar about bits.
Yes.
And I learned, now I never was a rider, you know, I never rode in a show. I was a historian all the time and a breeder, you know, and a researcher. But I learned more about bits in about 20 minutes. The man was very knowledgeable. Very knowledgeable guy. But he had a small Appaloosa mare, and that was Sox's mother. And because she's got some famous siblings too. She won the most, you know. But I have records at Tudor Bars 159, and then classes at the International / Congress. Then the Crisco kid won 60, but I'm pretty sure she's won more than that now. I'd have to.
Elena started riding her. She was 7 or 8, and she rode her whole show career.
Right.
And kind of threw her on there. She had Beaver's Best Yet was her first great pony.
Oh, right.
And he passed away when she was 7 after she'd been showing him. And Socks was a little bit of a powerhouse. We weren't quite sure how she was going to handle. Allison had been showing her. Mare was fast gamer, and here's this little bitty girl. And Socks took great care of her.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a learning curve a little bit, but she won High Point 8 and under when it was 8 and under, through 9 through 12, and 13 through 18.
Yeah, they just kept going.
Consistently, yeah.
Yeah. And the cool story that brings us together a little bit, our families, is, you know, she was a famous show mare, and sometimes when you go to breed famous show mares, it doesn't work. You know, they usually throw 1 or 2 good ones, but they don't have a baby every year. But your mom made the decision, I guess, to breed her, and she only bred her once, right?
Yeah.
Only, and we shipped semen from Minnesota down to Kiddo Tough, and you know, my family bred him, and then he went away for a while, and when he was 16, we bought him back, my brother and I, and that was one of the first things that happened. Was she called her and Buzzkirks. Both shipped. I think that was Lammer's 410 or some mare like that. And anyway, Captain's the result. And I know the modern people that are watching, if you've been in POAs the last 10 years, you know who he is. So what's his registered name? The Caribbean Kid. I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, I was like, why didn't I can't remember
Well,
that.
I just said Captain, but yeah. So
we named him Captain after my grandfather, who had passed around the time.
And when I do a Kiddo Tough episode, we'll have pictures of him.
Yeah,
I am a little short.
They're shown with the new family and a new little girl.
Right.
We just won a High Point this past weekend.
There's the mare we were just talking about, right? That's Socks right there.
And that's my sister Elena.
Yeah.
Lead lining, and then that's my little girl Ella.
Right.
And she was 1 in
she
that
was
picture.
1 in that picture.
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that something? So that kind of brings us into, go ahead and tell me the story about how your family kind of got into horses, and then of course POAs, and I'll sit back and drink some water. So go ahead. So
we moved here from Simi Valley, California, 89 or 90. My brother was born in 1990 in Oklahoma. And when we moved here, my mom, who grew up with horses, said, if we move to Oklahoma, we're going to get horses. You know, it was already in the plan.
Rest is history.
So I was 6 years old, and I went to my first riding lesson at a place called Ponyland. And, of course, I loved it. And my mom asked me afterwards, she said, you know, so do you want a pony? And I'm like, I'm a 6-year-old girl, duh, I want a pony, of course, you know. Right. And because this was a few years ago and we didn't have Facebook or really the internet, we got in the classifieds in the paper. And we found 3 places we went to go visit and look at horses. We didn't have anything really in mind other than just something that was our family's first horse. Right. And we ended up at a place, and they had 12 horses tied up in a pen. And Mom said, okay, well, let's pick one. You know, we got a selection here. And we ran around, and we picked one out that was spotted. You know, she kind of looked like this mare here, out of Socks here. Just a little more flaxen mane and tail, had little snowflakes all over. And we called her Snowflake. And borrowed a trailer, got her back to Ponyland, and started hitting the local open shows. And you guys were renting from Ponyland at that time. Yeah. We had still great friends with the owner of Ponyland. And they did birthday parties and little kid riding lessons. And we went to a show, and someone came up to us and said, hey, that's a good-looking POA. And we're like, yeah, what? What's a POA? Yeah, what's that? And they came out and got our hardship registered, and there was a couple other ponies at Ponyland that qualified for registration, and we started showing and POAs. And is Ponyland in Edmond? It was in Edmond. Okay. Yeah. All right. And since then, years 93, I believe, my parents bought our boarding stable, Stoner Jakers. Okay. And then it just. And I wouldn't even want to guess how many kids your mom has had at that stable. I mean, hundreds. Yeah. She's been very POA focused. The whole barn is someone's looking for a horse,
right,
that is definitely, she's one of the biggest advocates
right.
for the breed.
And one thing, your mom and I, she's bought horses from me and stuff, and we kind of have a, love-hate relationship, whatever, it don't matter. But she's, she spent money on some of my horses and stuff.
Yeah.
But one thing I always respected about her was she went to the national sale. She would buy weanlings. She would buy all kinds of stuff. But I mean, she'd buy elsewhere too. But she would bring home weanlings back to Oklahoma, and sometimes she might not keep them very long. But that's the whole thing about that sale.
Yeah.
I'm kind of plugging the sale now because we need that sale.
Oh yeah.
And when I say we,
things.
the POAC needs that sale. I mean, it's a revenue generator, and it spreads the POA blood just like Blackhand going to Washington.
Oh, absolutely.
She would take those colts and fillies. They might be from South Dakota, Minnesota, like she bought from me. She bought that one filly for $400 from me. She was 40 inches, 40 and a quarter, the Diamond Bucks kid. And no one looked at her. She was built perfect, and she had cute head. But she wouldn't have won any show because she was tiny. And your mom seen her, and I mean, $400, that's gas money,
Oh, yeah.
And she's won many classes now at the Congress.
And then do you remember who we bought the next year?
Yeah.
Get Her Done Kid.
The Get Her Done Kid, yeah. And I've seen him, and I've judged him.
Yeah.
And I've judged him in Cherokee
stables.
and stuff, and I'm like, yeah, he's a good jumper and stuff, and he's a beautiful looking. Well, I got to say it, I bred him.
No, he really is. He's stunning.
He's a cool, He never really made it in the mainstream POAs so much, but she showed at your place and in different things, in open shows, and he's a pretty POA. But yeah, but anyway, let's kind of start talking about Silver Wind and what you're doing, and I'm just gonna stop you for a minute because I want to say something about you and basically the national show. I mean, maybe I'm overstating this, but you've really helped the national show the last couple of years. I mean, your influence. A lot
of people that like to go to that show.
Right, you took your stables away. Like if you weren't there, I mean, the show wouldn't have made the money it made, and it wouldn't have the entries. So I mean, I honor you for that, because that's just like your mom with the sale. Of course, she brings kids to the show too. But
yes.
You bring, and another thing, and then I'll let you talk, but I am the host. Anyway, even though you drove over an hour to get here. Another thing you've done that was ingenious, and you helped save some ponies' lives, and some of them were in good hands too, but you extended their lives. You went and found geriatric POAs, some of them.
Yeah.
I mean, and we, and I don't know, some of them you didn't buy, but other people bought. But you have Copper Sundance, and some of them are gone now, I know. But Driftwood's Montego Bay,
He's still gone.
and
I got
his
Mr.
street,
Sunny Delight.
Mr. Sunny Delight was a famous grand champion, right?
Montego were friends.
Yeah, and
Rock Solid.
Rock Solid. I remember him as a baby. I
always tell people, I said, these are the horses I competed against in my youth.
Right.
And finally, they got old enough where I could afford
You
them.
could afford them. Yeah, that's the thing. That's
and give
another.
them a nice retirement too. A lot of them, they still do like little pony rides if they're older or something that keeps them active.
Right. Well, you have his street kid there, and I've judged him at some of your training shows.
He's my champion maker.
He's your packer, yeah.
He has generally a handful of kids that show him every year at Congress, and if someone's horse gets hurt, even if we don't know him, he's the one I can go take him in whatever class, and he's going to take
What's
care
that
of you.
award they come up with a few years ago? He needs that award, that pony award, because he may not be this and that, but yeah, he's helped so many kids. But you just kind of filled your stables with that, with POAs like that. And how many kids do you have? I mean, maybe you can't say for tax reasons or something.
No, how many kids that do POAs?
Yeah.
We're trying to count that up to, we have about 40 to 50 families that own POAs or lease POAs.
Okay.
And
all right.
And they kind of do a variety of things. I have some that go in rodeo mostly and will come to a POA show every so often.
Okay.
Some that go and do the hunter jumper stuff. So it's kind of varied.
I'm going to scroll through here as you're talking and just
what's there
she is on Peekaboo Street, another one my family actually I raised her, but she was a cool POA.
Yeah, she's a lesson horse at my mom's barn.
Right,
still.
Your mom still has her, so. And then there's Copper Sundance. Yep.
Do you know how old he is this year?
Yeah, I do know how old. I actually there was some people sitting at a meeting and they were all wondering how old he was, and it was I'm gonna draw a blank on her name, but Dale Rigg, and you know her name. Anyway, and then and John Berger, and there was some other people, and I said, I think he was born in 85, and this would have been in the 2000s, and that's when they were starting that oldest pony deal. And they went in and looked. Missy Korn was there, and she was running the show, or for the office, and they pulled his registration thing in '85. So and he's still going.
He's in great health. He has the best family, the Belotes that own
the Belotes,
him. If you want to be a horse owned by somebody, that's the
family. That's a good family.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that's and that's your daughter there again, right? Yeah, these are all pictures of her. I noticed, Ashley, you must be a little shy because I asked for pictures and you sent 10 of her and only one of you.
I'm not going to lead liner. You know how kids are listening to their own parents.
I understand that.
It's a lot easier to be the mom that takes the pictures.
And I remember him in South Dakota. I believe it was the Likeness family. Yeah, they
Micah
showed
and
him.
his family came down.
Okay,
I think it was 2
Micah.
or 3 years ago to see him at nationals at Congress.
Right.
And that was such a cool thing. Mike and I grew up showing together, and to see him get to see his old pony and introduce to his kids. I mean,
and look at that color.
Micah, he grabbed him and kissed him right on the face.
Oh, cool. Well, he should.
Well, he has that iconic tail. It's not a fake tail.
That's not a fake tail.
He's got some good hair on him.
Yeah, and look at that color. I mean, he didn't roll out.
30. What was this? 34 in that picture.
34 in that picture. Yeah.
It's pretty good.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let's move on to another one. There's a little more modern POA now, but he's making a name for himself. Is his name RM's Hollywood Gold? Is
Hollywood Red.
Hollywood Red, yeah. He's not
red.
gold, he's red.
Yeah, he's kind of shiny.
He was bred by Rodney Miller out in Ohio, and he's put together too. He's a modern day POA, but I mean, he's getting some age on him now too.
I think he's 17 or 18.
17 or 18. I remember him as a yearling. I remember Doc Nemers telling me about this colt that I don't think he passed for color or something. They took him to a show as a yearling, and they had him all. They had somebody there to show him and stuff.
Nice
I believe
that's
LP
testing now.
LP. We're there again. You got to adapt and survive. So.
Yep, she got to show by herself. 4 years old this past year.
Okay. Well, that was her right there. Yeah. So that was I didn't want to make the show all about her, but I did put quite a few pictures. So. Well, anything else you want to add before I start talking about some other stuff, wrapping things up? We've been on the air for over an hour. So
hey, you did pretty good.
We did good. Hopefully we didn't bore people. We rock solid, somebody just put with 3 hearts.
Yes.
So Kay Swink, sorry, Kay. I mentioned Dale, but I couldn't come up with Kay. I was like the Virginia eye doctor, horse doctor, grew up in Iowa with the Victors.
I
Kay
think that's
Swink.
the thing about POAs that's kind of been the coolest is, like when we say a POA family, like it really is a POA family.
Oh, yeah.
My POA people, I grew up with them more so than my own cousins, my own aunts and uncles. And
me too.
These shows are, they're a big old family reunion,
Right.
On all spectrums of it. People,
And I know I've talked about this with my good friend Jeremy Stevens from Kansas, and he's got a great family. He's going to be a guest in a couple weeks with Jared Katzenberger. We're going to talk about prefixes, JN to JNJ, because Jeremy and Julie have JNJ, and of course Katzenberger's had JN, still do. But anyway, we've talked about, how like you go to work and stuff, and even church and your life you lead, and then you go to POA, and it's like a whole different thing. Like when I was young and I kind of had jobs that I could get off work easy to go to POA shows and stuff, and people didn't know anything. They knew I was a pony guy, but they didn't know anything about it, or they had no clue. And then I'd go and I'd feel like royalty, all these friends and people slapped me on the back, and even as a kid, but especially as an adult, and it was just a different world. And he said stuff like that too, because it was just a whole different world, and it's just hard to explain unless you
Absolutely.
And I didn't show like you did. I showed halter, but I didn't ride, because I didn't want to get embarrassed. But I wanted to. I loved it when I seen kids riding my horses.
Too late, Kent. There's the adult classes.
Oh yeah, I might show showmanship if you get. I'm 48, so do 48 and over showmanship. I'm in. I can go down to Silver Wind Stables and take some lessons.
It'd be nice and fun. But now it is that big family atmosphere, and the cool thing is that my best friends still from showing POAs were your biggest competition. The people that you strived to beat or to win with, and I think that's very unique.
Right.
In the breed, like I can't think of anybody I showed with that I didn't. We didn't all get along in life.
I don't want to knock quarter horses, because quarter horses help build POAs. You know, it's the look that it is today. You know, it's not a pony anymore.
It's a
small horse. But the first time I went to a quarter horse show was probably '92. And I felt like, you may be too young for this, Ashley, but Crocodile Dundee. That's what I felt like. I was like, good day, hi. You know, and everybody was, they were just giving me dirty looks and brushing their, like, you know, spraying their peppies, like, get out of the way, you know. And I went there to see some friends, and I'm still friends with these people from Minnesota, great quarter horse breeders. But, you know, POA atmosphere is just different. Everybody, it's like cheers, you know, everybody knows your name, and hi, you know, and people are so, if a halter breaks, or I don't know how many times I was at a show and something happened, or somebody stalled next to us, and somebody'd come up and, hey, I heard you needed this, or show clothes, or, you know, and
absolutely.
Right.
And anybody watching too that's considering that maybe hasn't gotten into POAs, is considering going to a show, you're going to find a really welcoming group, especially if you go and introduce yourself. And, you know, it's intimidating not knowing the rules or this and that. But, like, we all started, you know, that way.
And you got to be patient with POAs, because it is, I mean, you have to be a certain height. You have to be a color. But that's what makes it so special and unique. I mean, you have to, you know, stay within that. And then the rule book, you know, is thick because of that. But there's so many opportunities, and you can breed them. And we have a big futurity still, and now the pleasure stuff. And I think reigning's going to be the big thing again.
The ranch classes.
Are getting big everywhere, and POAs is grabbing onto that, and that's good. And I hope reining.
They're selling for some pretty big bucks in the ranch world.
Yeah, in the ranch world, we need some of those to sell at in Illinois or wherever the international.
To afford them still.
Well, yeah, and that's another thing we might wrap up with that. You know, there's POAs selling, registered POAs selling for 20, 40, 100,000 now. You know, at auction, not private. 115. Yep, that leopard. And you know, the bad thing is they're selling under Bubblegum and Snickers and Snoopy or whatever, and they have registered names, you know, and they probably, some of them trace back to Blackhand for sure, Siri Chief and Danny Boy and stuff. But you also can, like the Diamond Bucks kid and stuff, you still can go to a sale and buy a $400 baby that has registered papers, good bloodlines, a sound mind, and grow up to be like this horse right there, you know. Not that he sold like that, but you know that. I mean, there is POAs.
A lot. You have any,
like Doc's Rough and Tough, he sold for like $825, and Doc Nemers was already famous when he bought him. And the man that bought him, Dean Damon, I hope he's watching tonight. He, you know, he made him a grand champion twice as a yearling and a 2-year-old, and he bought him for $825 at the national sale.
Well, we went. I can't remember what year it was. It was when I first had Silverwind, and the first year we went up and was buying for clients. I think I bought 10 weanlings. 10
weanlings.
I had almost 30 that we bought that year, and the next year we exceeded 30. But it was really fun. We just brought the babies back. I had a couple from the Spencers that I bought too. Turned them loose in a pen, and people just picked out their babies. And they were great prices to get started in it too.
And you got people, I remember you got new people in because of that too.
Absolutely.
That'll get non-horse people in because they see a pin just like you guys going to Pony Land or whatever all those years ago, and you just get foundered on it, you know.
And you kind of get an attachment to the breeder of those horses too. Like you didn't, you know, do real great selling us Diamond Bucks kid for $400, but we sure bought a lot of other horses from you afterwards because we enjoyed them.
You bought my highest selling one I ever sold. So and you know, and some work out and some don't, but you know, that's what I'm saying. There's $10,000 POAs and more, and there's $1,000 POAs, and there's 5. So I don't want to scare away people. You know, it's not all like some of those
POAs. Easier to train too.
Right. Some of those that sold for that kind of money actually didn't go back into POAs. They're going to be, there's some in, I imagine they're in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, or ranches or private, you know, estates basically, because they're good looking animals. But, you know, there's always, we do need right now supply and demand for a while now. That happened to all breeds. There's going to be a little more demand than supply because it just, with the '08 bubble, you know, a lot of people got out of raising horses. And, but it'll come back. I mean, POA has been around. Well, our first guest, you know, I don't want to put him, you know, but he's about 70 years old, and he was 4 years old when Blackhand was born. So that tells you that gentleman we were talking to who's in Minnesota, retired, he grew up in POAs. You know, it's been around. I mean, last year the show survived during COVID. I mean, they easily could have canceled that show. I'm so glad they did. In the sale, I understand, and of course the sale has to compete against the internet and just the whole. Yeah, it's hard for the sale, but hopefully it bounces back this year. I mean, that started in '57. So that's a lot of tradition there. So, well, you got anything else to add about your family or your stables?
So. I do have some swag though. If you want to do a little
show me some. What I'm gonna do is, because I can't see the names right here, so I'll probably just post it later. But go ahead if you want to grab some. Just don't trip over there. We got cords. Again, while Ashley's getting some swag there, I want to thank our sponsors. Dr. Chocolate, he's a 2019 POA stallion owned by the Seehafers Performance Horses from Marshfield, Wisconsin. And then Silver Wind Stables, Ashley Mckenzie in Edmond, Oklahoma. I want to thank Jackson's Auto Family, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, and Shane Jackson personally. He's the GM here. And you know, if you're looking for a Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram, you're going to be in Tulsa this summer. A lot of people showing horses. I can drive. I'm going to be there several days. So drive over.
They've really hooked up POA in here. I know you guys can't see all of it, but it's pretty.
Yeah, you see my retirement plaques over there. You see it when I got off the board. Yeah, I need to put that up behind me. So anyway, so we're about ready to wrap up. I just want to mention that Siri Chief is again going to be our topic next week. He was number 2. And I have about 25 shows scripted already. So,
awesome.
You know, I'm a POA nerd. So, again, I want to say thanks to Dr. Chocolate, Ashley and Silver Wind, and the Jackson's family and Jackson's Auto family. Yeah. Thanks for watching, everybody. Thanks, Ashley.